My dudes and dudettes, it is of course your favorite Shogun here, Sugi, and today we are going to be reviewing the latest One Piece arc, which is known as the Egghead Arc, which is also being referred as the Future Island Arc, which is considerably worse name, but hey, everybody's entitled to have a bad taste, I guess. And it goes without saying that this review will have some spoilers on it, especially towards the end of the video, so in case you haven't seen the whole arc or not caught up with the manga, maybe come back later this video or just skip when the spoiler starts essentially. Now, one of the things that I really loved right out of the bat of this arc was that it wasn't overstaying its welcome. The Egghead arc is only 70 episodes, and that is kind of short compared to Wano, which was 191. I believe Whole Cake Island was around 100, and then we had Dressrosa, which I believe was also like 120 or was 130 episodes. So there was a lot of these, very, very long arcs going, which definitely were overstaying their welcome. And there was a lot of fatigue going on for those arcs and the characters and all the filler stuff that they really had. And yes, there were some mini arcs between them, which were definitely not too long, and that was good. But I think this is like, kind of like the perfect spot. I think maybe 60 episodes would have been better because obviously in the mix there was amount of fillers and recap episodes, and some episodes obviously in One Piece fashion were moving kind of slow, but obviously we do have the one pace going on where you can watch this whole show on without all of that filler stuff, which I wish I had the opportunity to do so because I can't just wait for the edits to come out for me to continue this show. So when the new episode is out, I'm like, yeah, I gotta see it. Now, let's talk about a bit of the animation and the OST and the other stuff before we go into talking about the story points and my, pros and cons. So, there is obviously a new OST for the whole arc. I think most of them are okay. It's not something that I would listen outside the anime. I always have said that One Piece, I think, is a bit of a lackluster OST compared to the other big threes, like, Dragon Ball, Naruto, or Bleach, even. And yes, there are some amazing tracks, but then you have to realize like there's like over 1,000 episodes of One Piece, and they had all this time to create very extensive music catalog, which would have a lot of hits. And I don't think it really has that many, given out how there must have been hundreds already of songs in this OST in throughout the span of like over 1,000 episodes. So that's a bit of a peevance, but it's whatever. Okay. Now there's three openings for this arc, and I actually like all of them. All of them are also kind of different from each other, different musical style. One is kind of like a rock song, one is more like a pop song, and one is more like a theatrical. And those are kind of the things that One Piece kind of tends to rotate a bit. There's a bit of that silliness in some of the songs. Some are very emotional, and there seems to be some type of pattern there in terms of like mixing on those. And then there is two EDs. The first ending song of this arc is called "The One" by Muku. I don't know how to pronounce that, and that is the best ED in the whole series. In all, the course of all the episodes and the EDs, there must have been like 20, 30 of them at this point. This is the best. This is a really, really good track, and I think it really embodies maybe a lot of the arc too, the story of Bonnie in a way, and I just like that. The second ED kind of sucked. It's kind of like those silly Japanese songs which just don't really have a lot of brains in them, but it's not horrible, but I definitely don't like it. And especially after the one, you kind of have a pretty much it's hard to top that. In terms of the animation, obviously, I think ever since Wano, the quality of the animation has been going up. They have been putting a lot more effort into it. Toei is a machine because they got so many studios working on a lot of stuff. And I think in order to upkeep the quality of the animation, they have now gone on break. And I think this is the first time that this has happened in like 30 years that this anime basically almost has been on air. Yes, there has been like golden weeks and like 1 week cutoffs when there has not been a show. But I don't remember, at least on my viewing time, when I started watching. This was before the time skip happened. So maybe 2017 or something when I catched up with the anime. There has not been a multi-week break like this. So that's kind of crazy to me that this has happened. I think it's a great decision, and it's the best decision if this also means that there's going to be less filler and less recaps. I wouldn't count on that, but it might happen. Okay, so that might be in the cards. Now let's finally talk about the story of this arc, and I have a lot of opinions to say about it because obviously that's what we're here. We're talking about the arc and the story events, what we like, what we hated. And you could say like 50% of this arc is really about telling the backstory of Kuma and Bonnie, while remaining 50% is focused around a bit of like Vegapunk's story and his ultimate reveal of the broadcast that happens in the end of the season. And then there's a bit of like some Gorosei marine stuff that's really on the back line. There's not really that much going on there. And compared to Wano, there isn't really that many fights in my opinion. Like I think a lot of the beginning is exploration and some skirmishes with the sea beasts and things like that. They're not really fighting that much when you think about it. And of course, the fights are not really that amazing in this arc, and I think a lot of the reasons for that is because yes, there's some cool scenes, but when you think about it, they were not really that meaningful. I think in terms of like how many characters actually die on the arc is very low, and in a way, I don't know, I don't know. I just feel like part of me is like they were like visually great, but doesn't mean like there has to be also a narrative and meaning to the fights as well. So I think there was a lot of the skirmish type of element here more than actual meaningful fights that would actually matter. And that's my opinion about it. And people can have a differing opinion about that, and that is fine. Like for example, we have the fight between Rob Lucci and well, Luffy's fighting him, and then Zoro is fighting him. And to me, it's like really outrageous to kind of even assume that Rob Lucci would be in the par with like fucking, because if he's able to hold up against these two, that kind of means that he would be on level of Kaido. But this is just an assassin. He's not an admiral. Admiral, I think, Kizaru should be logically above Rob Lucci and stronger than Rob Lucci. So to me, this was like even the idea that Zoro was just not like destroying him absolutely was a bit of a disservice to Luffy and Zoro, but I guess they just needed to have that fight happening in terms of the lore and stuff like that. Also, kind of feel like why was this a necessary element to have on the arc? I don't know. Maybe the CP0 people have maybe well actually in a lot of ways yeah they were here to assassinate Vegapunk, so I guess they needed to be there because they could have been admiral could have just killed them, which kind of did happen indeed. And then, of course, we have the Gorosei. We'll be seeing their abilities for the first time, which have been bestowed upon by Imu. So we got to learn a bit more about them and some of the symbology and a bit of the interesting occult things that we also saw. Now, of course, there's some new characters that were introduced in this arc. We had the Vegapunk clones, the Seraphim, which I was not really a big fan of. And then we have Stussy and some new Marines were shown. And then, of course, my favorite character of the arc, Emmet, which really didn't have that much to do with everything, but hey, I think it was a good build up for him. They were like showcasing me in the beginning of the, arc, and then finally in the end, he would basically be showing up. And of course, all of these characters felt relevant here. And I did find some of the Vegapunk clones annoying. Thank God they're gone now. And I think like a lot of the characters did have something important to do this arc. I felt like in Wano arc, we just had too much of these filler samurais who had nothing to do with the story, and the story could have been totally told without them. There was just too many shit like put into Wano and so packed with so many filler minor characters that this didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'm glad that, this was not like a similar arc like that. Another very annoying thing about this arc was how weak and dumb Vegapunk was, given the fact that he has a very powerful devil fruit, Nomi Nomi Nomi, which basically allows him to store infinite amount of information into his brain. So you would think that he would come out with some type of MacGyver solutions into the problems, or he would use his high IQ to outsmart and outwit the opponents. But you saw none of that throughout the arc. Like half of the time, he would be moping around what he did to Bonnie and Kuma. And other times, he would be basically delegating the task to the other Vegapunk clones. And like basically, he would be doing a lot of impulsive, emotional decisions which were not calculated at all. And obviously, he gets killed in the end because he couldn't find a solution to do the broadcast and also get out of the island alive. And he was like totally useless. And lore wise, he should be the most smartest person in the whole One Piece universe. And he's definitely falling very, very short of that requirement. And I also kind of felt like there should have been maybe more interaction between him and Frankie, given out that Frankie basically spent so much time on his old lab. So you would think like two scientists coming together and there would be some exchange, but nah, none of that also happening. So Vegapunk to me is like, what happened here? Now, one of the other things that I was really amazed by was how much modern parallels this story has to our real world. And I felt like Oda was like secretly red pilling us because what is really the big part about this arc is the Vegapunk message. But obviously, the Vegapunk message is giving us a truth about the One Piece world. But the equivalency of that in our world is really the release of the JFK files, the Epstein files, the Epstein list. And in the real world, we are seeing this change where people are finally realizing that governments are hiding information from us. And the narratives and this history that we have been told is a partial truth or one-sided truth, and it's missing a lot of crucial information, and we have been partially lied to. And that's kind of what we are seeing happening in the One Piece world. People are realizing like the world government has been spinning off this tale, which is absolute nonsense, and they also have been hiding the information that there is this sea level rise happening, which is obviously catastrophic. It's kind of like the same equivalency if the world governments in our world would know about the aliens and they've been hiding us that information for a long time. And so there's a big reveal in that sense in the consciousness in the real world, but also in the One Piece world. And the parallels are like, they are there. Okay, like this is huge. And that's why it's resonating. This anime is so resonating with so many people around the world because it really tells about the modern world. Like, the inflation, all of this stuff, people becoming, thieves and robbers. And that's the equivalency of piracy. People are tired of the corruption and they become pirates. That's basically the story here. And there's so much of those parallels. And we have kind of touched upon a bit of that, like Mari Joyce being Israel, Marines being the America, and the same parasitic relationship that exists between the two, and Tenryubito being the Jews, and all of that. And also Imu being the embodiment of fake democracy and justice. The people have been, said that there's no kings at the top. There's no kings at the top. This is all democracy. And that's what the Western world in our real world is telling us. Like, it is all democracy. But in the end, behind the scenes, there are elite and, these people who are really pulling the strings. And that is Imu. Imu is the secret mastermind puppeteer behind the scenes, which is basically pulling everything and, putting this charade that there's democracy, justice. Obviously, they don't talk about democracy in One Piece, but it's kind of like, that there is some type of justice existing here in the world and all that stuff. So it's really embodying the message of the modern day world. As for my final thoughts, I thought Egghead was a good arc. It doesn't suffer as much of the pacing issues as some of the previous arcs did. There are a lot of good big revelations story-wise that are actually revealed. And that's kind of like seemingly, Oda's style. He's giving bit of us to chew on, but then he's introducing new mysteries which we want to learn more about. And that seems to be like what we are learning on every arc. We're also learning new mysteries. So it's like the mystery is just like getting expanded more and more. But I think at some point people will have enough information to basically finally think or presume what the One Piece is and what basically happened in the world of One Piece 800 years ago. So it's a very interesting ride, and more mysteries, more mythology is being explored, and I'm loving it basically. I haven't been disappointed at all. But I'm very excited for Alpha, so I guess we're going to be seeing again another review in 2 years or so. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next review.